Good morning, and welcome to Many Paths, Many Visions, brought to you by the Labyrinth Society and with your host, Christiana Brinton. We have gotten off to a late start this year, but my first guest is one of the founding members of the Labyrinth Society and also the moderator this year for the Bountiful Harvest panel taking place during the 20th anniversary gathering this year. So, if you are joining us, I doubt if anyone is because I really didn't publicize this, but so I'm not really going to go into this at this point, but there will be a way for people to join in subsequent sessions, and I will post that on Facebook and the global group. So stay tuned for the rest of the sessions to be posted so people can join. This episode is entitled Bountiful Harvest, A Founder's First Impressions. And my guest, Neal Harris, as I said before, is one of TLS's founding members. And he's a licensed clinical psychotherapist who uses his own design, the patented Intuipath double finger labyrinth, in his clinical practice, as well as selling him and his product pages on his website. He's also the originator of Illinois' first permanent outdoor labyrinth, the Earth Wisdom Labyrinth, located in Elgin, Illinois. Greetings, Neal, and welcome to Many Paths, Many Visions. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Christiana. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
So let's just jump right in here. You remain very active within the Labyrinth Society community. You're the volunteer coordinator within the membership division. And so you have a unique perspective on the changes that have taken place over the last 20 years that many of the original members don't have. So we'll talk about this in a moment. But first, let's go back 20 years. Let's talk about how you came to be involved with the creation of the Labyrinth Society back in 1997, about or so.
Yep, that was about the time. And in a nutshell, I had created a number of outdoor labyrinths, was dabbling with finger labyrinths at that point, and was teaching about labyrinths. And there was an article that I had read back in 1995 that really got me started with labyrinths. It was in New Age magazine, and it talked about this Reverend Lauren Artress and how she had pretty much began using labyrinths with her parish. And it also had the name of Robert Ferre out of St. Louis. And in around 97, I was contemplating creating this huge outdoor sand labyrinth in our backyard. And I thought about contacting Robert Ferre, and I did so. And after several different communications with him about the feasibility of creating this type of labyrinth, especially in the Midwest, where leaves would be falling on it in the fall, and it sounded like it would be a major mess if I went ahead with this project. Robert mentioned that there was going to be a group of labyrinth enthusiasts who were going to meet in St. Louis later that year, and wanted to find out if I wanted to be part of that. And I said, absolutely. And so I went there and met with a fantastic group of people. A lot of folks were dowsers, part of the International Dowsing Society. And so I learned quite a bit about dowsing and about labyrinths. And we decided that wouldn't it be nice to expand our understanding and knowledge of labyrinths and potentially become an organization. And so the beginning of that was back in 97, and that was just a phenomenal experience to get together with all of these really well-known, as well as just, I felt like a neophyte. I really did. I had just been involved with labyrinths a couple of years at that point. And so a lot of my understanding really started coming out of that first gathering or grouping of labyrinth enthusiasts in St. Louis.
And did you know anything about dowsing before this meeting?
Yes,
Oh, you
yes.
did.
My father introduced me to the pendulum when I was 16.
Mm.
He made this very formal ceremony around passing the torch with using a pendulum, and I've been using a pendulum ever since. And so this wasn't new to me, but I found it fascinating. There was this connection between labyrinths and folks who were dowsing.
Oh, so your father was a dowser.
Yes,
Was that in
yes.
your family?
He was taught palmistry and dowsing by, at that point, an 80-year-old MD who used both of those in his practice. And so when my dad was young, he learned dowsing and then he passed it on to me. My first outdoor labyrinths were made as a result of using my dowsing skills. So it dovetailed quite nicely with what this group was talking about in St. Louis in '97.
Fascinating. I had no idea about this about you. So was your dad a doctor?
He was an optometrist,
Okay.
so he would use his dowsing mostly on a personal level to assist his sick kids with their dietary needs and with their to determine how long a particular illness would last, whether we needed antibiotics. So there was a lot of things that he used dowsing for, and of course, when he passed it on to me, I had seen him using it, and my mom as well, for many, many years.
Oh my golly, that is so cool. I have never heard, I know the dowsing community and I know that there's history, there's lineage there, but I think you're the first person that I've ever met in all these years that actually can talk about the lineage in your family when it comes to dowsing. I mean, I never really had this conversation with Sig or any of the other ones that I have known before. So I just find this so cool and so fascinating. That is amazing. And your whole family was doing this. That is really interesting. So I'm going to go back to your. I'm segueing here because I want to know. So you
Segway away.
segue. So you wanted to do this whole sand labyrinth. Then you met all these people who and talked about what the climate was all about and what would make sense in your area, et cetera, et cetera. So what did you end up finally making on your property that worked for the area where you live?
Made an 86-foot, 25-ton stone shark replica. And that was the first, and I'll put in quotes, public labyrinth in Illinois. It took up most of our backyard. We had about an acre and a third of property, and it was quite beautiful. We had a 6-foot copper pyramid that I had purchased in Sedona that same year. We were putting the labyrinth together, and said, "Oh, wow, this pyramid really needs to be in the center." And we don't tell the authorities, but I doused and we brought back several red rocks from different vortices in Sedona to put in the center of the labyrinth to add energy to
Mm.
it. And it was quite beautiful. It was quite a beautiful labyrinth. It was stone and grass. And during the process of creating it, we had put an ad in a local newspaper asking for volunteers each weekend to help with the building of it. And this one weekend, a woman who owned one of the original crystal skulls came with her skull, which was a 16-pound amethyst crystal skull. And the skull apparently had a consciousness, and the consciousness had told her that it wanted to be buried in the center of a labyrinth in Illinois. And at that time, there were no labyrinths in Illinois. So she saw the little ad that we put in. She got excited about it. Apparently, her skull got excited about it, and they showed up. And she gave me this story about it. The skull's name was Polly, and it was quite amazing to have this solid amethyst 16-pound skull talking through this woman about what it wanted and what it didn't want for our labyrinth. So
Wow.
yeah, it was,
Wow.
yeah, that blew my mind.
So is it buried in the backyard in the labyrinth?
No, no, we moved from that location
Ah.
when the neighbors found out that we were having healing ceremonies with a 16-pound amethyst skull suspended from the center of the pyramid. They got a little bit nervous about that. And there was a big media frenzy about that for almost a year. And it didn't bode well for us being able to stay in that location. So we moved to our current location. The skull decided after the labyrinth was created that it really didn't want to be buried. It wanted to perform healing ceremonies suspended from the from the pyramid. So we ran a little afoul with our neighbors. We ran a little afoul with the churches in our area. Again, they really
No.
didn't know anything about labyrinths, and they certainly didn't have any affinity for a crystal skull deciding what could go on our property and what couldn't. So it was very interesting at that time.
What a great story. Thank you so much for sharing that. Oh my
Sure,
golly.
sure.
That's so interesting.
You know, and I wasn't planning to share that at all. So thank you for the question.
I get so curious because yes, I'm so glad you shared that. Thank you, Neal. So let's get back to so the next thing that happened is well, one of the next things was that you hosted the first Labyrinth Society Board of Directors meeting in April of 1999 at your Relax for Life Center in Barrington. Now, is so? Did you just move it within Barrington, or is this as Barrington was at your new home?
That was our new home,
Okay.
and we opened up a holistic education center here. So half of the home, and it continues to be a holistic education and services center with 3 outdoor walking labyrinths, who I'm sure a number of the folks who are coming to the gathering this year will have an opportunity to enjoy the 3 different designs: a 7th Circuit Cretan, a man in the maze, and a ancient 8-walled Roman. So little different patterns than, say, the usual shard or sometimes even the Cretan design. And we wanted it that way so that people could get a different sense of what the energy of labyrinths could be, besides the shard and the Cretan. So, so very happy to be here. And as far as the first board of directors meeting, there was a lot of basic stuff that we needed to attend to as a board of directors, like creating the first bylaws. So we spent a lot of time doing that over a period of 2 or 3 days during the board meeting. We spent a lot of time trying to create our first logo. And every time that we got close to finding a labyrinth design or a labyrinth idea for our logo, someone would chime in and say, "Oh, but I'll bet you that's a copyright design and we're not going to be able to use it." And we, after hours of going back and forth, and the nice thing about TLS even back then was that we were very heart-centered, very appreciative of each other's abilities, understandings, misunderstandings. And so we were very gentle with one another, even though we got into some, I would say, gently heated discussions about these different things. And we even had Sig Longren by telephone because he couldn't make the board meeting. He couldn't fly in from the UK for the board meeting. So we had him chiming in on a speakerphone, a landline, in the middle of the room where we were having these different discussions of things. We came up with a design that we found in the book Larry's Party, which was a gift that the board of directors gave me for hosting this board meeting. And it was this really cool thing that looked like something you would find on a rock face at Val Carmonica or one of the other ancient rock sites in northern Italy. And it had two eyes in the center of a very primitive Cretan design. And we all fell in love with that. Until I think it was Sig who said, that's a copyrighted design and we're not going to be able to use it.
Oh, no.
And we all were like, oh, no, after hours of going back and forth with this. But anyway, the logo really became simply a variation on the text of the Labyrinth Society, which it currently is today. So we opted for something much more simple than what we were planning and what we were gnashing our teeth about. And it's kind of fun that way, that the creative process worked in such a way where we really had to hash some things out before it became very clear what we wanted to do. And everyone was in agreement with that, and we moved forward, and then it was just a matter of what particular font we wanted to use for that logo. And I think it was Helen Curry, our first president, who came up with something called American Unshul. And so she put that forward. We all liked the font, and we moved from there. If I may say, the other big thing that we talked about at the first board of directors meeting was the ins and outs of how we were going to put on the first gathering, which was going to be later that fall in Colorado. We wanted to make sure that everyone knew, each of the board of directors knew exactly what their role was going to be in Colorado so that we could put on a really great first gathering. And we did.
This is great. Thank you, Neal. This is wonderful to listen to. And so this is 1999. So in terms of your own personal work process, and where were you then? Were you already a licensed psychotherapist, or you were studying, and did your involvement with the Labyrinth Society sort of coincide with the choices you made in terms of work related choices? So how did this collaboration deepen your interest in labyrinths and potentially your life path choice, your work path choice?
That's a good question. I had been a clinical psychotherapist since the middle 80s. And so I had been using labyrinths in my practice of psychotherapy to assist folks who would come either the first time or maybe the second or the third time, and they would immediately say something like, I really don't know what I want to talk about today. I'm not sure where to go. And then I would pull out the double finger labyrinth design. I would sit across from my client, and through the relaxation, the path afforded each one of us as we were finger walking our own full labyrinth pattern connected by the same piece of wood, I found over and over again that people began to relax and be able to naturally dive deeply into their issues and actually see beyond some of the things that were really keeping them blocked or stuck in their psychotherapy process. So at the same time, what I was finding is that I was relaxing and my own blind spots in therapy and my opinions about this person, my clients, I should say these people, and my clients, it was all becoming much clearer to me when I would have biases and I would protect them and myself from using those biases to move a particular therapy session a particular way, the way that I thought it needed to go. And it also became very clear to me in using the double finger labyrinth pattern that it wasn't just me and my client in the room, that there were many unseen helpers that were whispering in my ear, that were ultimately helping my clients see the truth about what they were dealing with so that they could get to resolution of these issues much, much quicker. So that's the preamble for this, Christiana. And then to answer your question a little bit further, because there were all these wonderful people in the society at that time, I was able to develop great friendships and working relationships with these folks. So I had people that my clients, my students could go to if they were looking, for example, to have a canvas labyrinth professionally done. I could go to people who were more adept at creating outdoor labyrinths. I could go to people who were working in schools and working with kids and labyrinths. So I didn't have to be able to do it all myself. And that was a wonderful, wonderful thing because I was teaching in colleges. I was writing journal articles for professional counseling journals on the labyrinth concept and how to use them. There were a number of things. I was developing canvas labyrinths, or I should say, more like fabric labyrinths that I would make out of very light fabric so I could travel with them very easily and show people the possibility of what a walking labyrinth is about. I was inviting people back to our house to walk our big, at that point in in 96, 97, the big 25-ton stone chart. And it all became very medieval for me. I felt like I was connected to labyrinths, not just in this lifetime, and forgive me if some listeners in the future might have a problem with that, but it's been my experience that it's hard to recognize that this is my only lifetime. So I found that the connection with pyramids and labyrinths and just stuff that was prehistory really started to resonate with me. And probably the best example of that was when I was teaching a college class and I invited people the second week back to our home to walk this large outdoor chart design with large stones outlining it, or I should say, demarcating the pattern of the labyrinth. And we did it at sunset. We had torches going. And this was about a third of a mile to the center and then back out again. And this was a fall night. And after everyone had walked the labyrinth, I invited them inside to sit by our roaring fireplace and have hot chocolate and discuss the experience. And this one man who I really didn't think, and this is how you can't judge a book by its cover, this was a man who came to my classes wearing a three-piece suit and seemed very kind of standoffish, didn't really ask any questions. And it came time for people to share, and he was the last one to share. And he said, I don't know what happened, but as I was walking through your labyrinth, I closed my eyes and I knew where every turn was. And he could easily have fallen over rocks, very, very easily as he was walking the grass path. These fairly large rocks were outlining the path. And he said to me, I just knew where every turn was. And that's when I started writing about how labyrinths connect us with the millions upon millions of people who've walked these designs or used these designs for various higher purposes across many cultures and across many years. And the idea that labyrinths connect us with Jung's idea of the collective unconscious. And so we have these awarenesses and understandings and potentials when we walk into the sacred space that is the labyrinth experience, truly an intuitive playground for the spirit. And so I began writing about that in professional journals, and surprisingly, I wasn't laughed at with these kinds of awarenesses that I was putting forth into the professional counseling community. And it's only grown from there.
That's great. That is so interesting because I've maintained and I've had personal experiences myself where I'm on the labyrinth and I get a sense of the layered, how time is layered. It's not linear, it's layered, and the accessibility of past, present, and future in the moment. And it happens often. It's happened to myself, it's happened with others. People have told me their stories, and this is just another one of those stories where that experience of past, present, and future being accessible, and all that goes on or has gone on and will go on is accessible in the moment when you're walking, and that the labyrinth provides that possibility for people when they walk it. It's that's, to me, that's what that story means to me too, that there is that, that energetic ability that labyrinths provide. So that's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Well, let me just say, Christiana, that's a beautiful way to offer what you just did, and yeah, I totally agree with you. So thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. So you're a Veritas certified labyrinth facilitator, as well as have been on the board. How long were you on the TLS board of directors for?
Um, I'm probably going to have a senior moment about this, but as the first membership chair, I think I was there for 3 or 4 years in that position.
Okay.
So yeah,
Okay.
yeah. As far as Veritas, and I think you were asking also what, why did I feel the need to become a Veritas facilitator?
Yes.
Well, it's kind of happenstance, Christiana.
Mm-hmm.
I had been in contact with a woman who was head of a church labyrinth program. This was back in '99. I wanted to find out more about how she rented out the canvas labyrinth that the church owned, because I was thinking about expanding into doing rentals. And so I had spoken with her several times, and this was a Friday morning, about 8:30, that I called her and we chatted a little bit, and she said, "Oh, by the way, there's a woman by the name of Lauren Artress who's coming to the church today to do a Labyrinth facilitator training." And since I'd read about Lauren back in 95, in this article that really got me interested in labyrinths, I thought, wow, this is kind of cool. I think I want to be there. So I asked her if there was space available. She said yes. I quickly threw on clothes, drove the 45 minutes to an hour to get to the church just as the facilitator training was starting. And so that was my first experience with the Veritas facilitator training and meeting Lauren. And we had a chance to chat quite a bit over the weekend. And she wasn't that interested in labyrinth designs at that point that were not chart designs. And I was trying to educate her on all these different patterns that I had been playing with. And it was very interesting, her response to that. It was very cool. It was I'm more interested in the chart. And I said, that's fine, no problem. But I learned an awful lot about speaking to different groups about labyrinths by taking that facilitator training. And so I was certified in 99. And so I've held that Veritas facilitator certification since that time. And so many people have gone through her facilitator training program. And to me, it feels like she has been one of the really major people in spreading the idea of labyrinths around the world. Of course, you can also talk about people like Sig Lundgren. And in a much more minor way, you can say that because I created the first public labyrinth in Illinois, there weren't any labyrinths anywhere in Illinois before I started. And now there's over 200 public labyrinths across the state that in some small way I had a part in being a little Johnny Appleseed and spreading the seed of labyrinths in Illinois. So I feel really good about that.
And your the certification process the training process and then the certification, where I'm assuming, because I did the same, I got certified about the same time you did on the East Coast. Actually, I took my training at Grace in San Francisco, which was extraordinary. But I think, that helped you to be in front of people enough that this was a natural, that this is how it happened, a pebble in the pond effect kind of, where it just gradually spread and spread and spread. And so there was a definite correlation between having that certification and the training and giving you the ability to talk to just lots of different types of groups to interest them in creating their own labyrinths and having their own labyrinths programs, I would say, probably.
Absolutely. Yeah. And being a group leader by nature anyway, I found that I could spread labyrinths very easily to hospitals in my area, to cardiac rehab programs, to people who were dealing with diabetes, to folks who were having problems with fibromyalgia, and on with these life-affirming conditions that allowed the labyrinth to really begin to spread in a professional way out in at least in our area. So it was very gratifying. And like you said, the ability of Lauren to speak to any group at their level, I found to be incredibly helpful. Because while I tend to be somewhat tactful in the way that I present things, sometimes I can be a little bit direct. And so I found the Veritas training to be very helpful in that way, to kind of modify that for me.
Yeah, if nothing else, she is extremely thoughtful. I mean, really thoughtful. Like she really takes her time to think about the answers, to think about the process. I just finished listening to her video interview with Jody Lorimer and Mike Jagger for the iBook that the Labyrinth Society is doing. And that was one of the things and I've been around her many times in the early days, a lot. Early days meaning the late 90s, early 2000. Um, and yet that video really impressed upon me how careful she is with what she talks about and how deep, she really, it's a spiritual it's a spiritual process for her, absolutely 100% spiritual process. So
Certainly.
yeah,
Certainly.
very interesting. um, there was something else that I wanted to ask you, and of course, it's gone right out of my head now. Oh, did have you, with all of these labyrinths that you sort of Johnny Appleseeded, have you ever checked in on them, or do you know are they all still actively having labyrinth programs, or are some of them just there for the public to walk? Are they, have you checked in on them or checked up on to see if what the status was of some of these that you birthed basically?
Yes, most of them. Most of them I keep track of. And even the one that we're going to be visiting for the gathering at the Loyola University uh, Retreat and Ecology Center was one of the labyrinths that I had laid out. And a group of Boy Scouts came after me, dug the trenches, and put in bricks.
Hmm.
I don't know if it's exactly the same material now,
Hmm.
and there may be more labyrinths on the property. I haven't been back in several years, but most of the labyrinths that I've had some hand in are still quite active in the Illinois area. So
Hmm.
I'm very pleased about that.
Hmm.
Some have gone through restorations because it's been so many years, um, to recreate some of these labyrinths, put new materials in so that they're even more sustainable than they were originally. So yeah, it's really been good. And to be perfectly fair, like I said, there's over 200 public labyrinths in Illinois at this point. I've only had a hand in, really couple of dozen
Hmm.
of them. But a big part of, I think, the spread of labyrinths in Illinois was the media coverage that first labyrinth got. And a lot of the media coverage wasn't very positive. And so, because it created a sense of friction among the readership, it stood out in their minds a little bit more, and it became a topic of conversation at parties and things. People who didn't know anything about labyrinths would say, "Oh, did you see that article in the Chicago Tribune about that crazy guy in Barrington who had put 25 tons of stone in his backyard and invited the public to walk a pattern? Did you hear about that? Yeah, it's boy, the neighbors were really not real happy about that." So it created a sense of negative, but I think overall it helped spread labyrinths
Hmm.
throughout throughout our state, and probably beyond that as well.
It brought it to people's attention
Yes,
yeah.
yes, yes, absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
very
Um,
interesting.
yeah, yeah.
And so let's talk about, so now let's talk a little about the changes. We're talking about the spread of these labyrinths, and now there's over 200 in Illinois, and uh, how many across the world now. It's quite phenomenal. So, but let's talk about TLS, the Labyrinth Society specifically. How would you describe the changes that you've seen over the last 20 years? Sort of, is it like an ebb and flow, a pebble in the pond, or has it been incremental? How would you describe what you've experienced and witnessed?
I would have to say, Christiana, that it's been incremental. The Labyrinth Society, the more we grow, the more we, I think, recognize that there's more room for growth. And so we take these baby steps, which then finalize projects that have been on the table for a little while. And the Labyrinth Society has been very, very good since its inception of putting out a vision and going after it and not letting, unless something major occurs that says this is not a good idea after all. Once the baby steps have been accomplished, we go after our goals and we accomplish them. And the goals just keep getting wider and wider in their vision, which is fantastic because ultimately the vision statement for the society is to support the global community of labyrinths. And so the more that we, because we're an organization that was founded in the United States, we have to keep reminding ourselves that we are part of the global community. And there are so many different ways that the Labyrinth Society over the years has expanded their consciousness to include all the different countries around the world. And so that's very gratifying because that's certainly what I signed on for. And it's been something that has been accomplished in a very elegant way over the years.
Thank you. Can you point to some significant mileposts that you've noticed within your state, within the USA, worldwide over the past 2 decades that you particularly remember or stand out for you?
Probably, Christiana, the most significant milepost has been the adoption of labyrinths at churches. Mm-hmm. When I created the first labyrinth in Illinois, I was so excited that I opened up the phone book and I started calling all of these churches around my area and wanting to speak to the heads of those churches. And as soon as I got the words out, labyrinth, I got hung up on. And so it was very disheartening because I was going around our neighborhood with different magazine articles that I had found or newspaper articles about labyrinths at that time, showing people what a gift this could be to the community. And in attempting to get churches on board with bringing their parishioners to walk the labyrinth, it was like pulling teeth. And it was actually worse than pulling teeth. They didn't want to hear about it. Mm-hmm. And so these days, and really in the past maybe 10 years or so, most of the labyrinths, as you know, around the world are located at churches of all different denominations. Mm-hmm. And so it's been really, really exciting to see that shift. And so now, at least, really all the churches that I contacted originally back in '96 are on board with the idea of labyrinths because labyrinths are talked about in their church newsletter. And in a sense, I think the whole growth with labyrinths at churches has come about because it's keeping up with the Joneses. If you hear about an Episcopal church in another state or another part of your state that built a labyrinth, they're like, well, why aren't we doing that? Mm-hmm. So it's been very exciting that way.
And in fact, now I don't know what the statistics are, but how it relates to, or translates to more people coming to the churches or more people attending, or and I don't know. I know they're with the ones that I helped install in churches in the East Coast. There wasn't any statistical information about that at the time, and they weren't sure that there was going to be. Uh, any kind of correlation. But I would imagine that that's another reason. Well, if they're doing it and they're getting all these people to walk this labyrinth, people that are even a part of our church, and they're coming into, then they're getting interested, then maybe this is another way to, because the church attendance has declined. Uh,
Yes.
as
Yeah.
labyrinths have risen, attendance has declined to a certain degree for most churches, denominations.
Yes, except for the churches that have labyrinths.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so I know that's your point, and
yeah,
it's a wonderful point to make that, yeah, they're getting new members because they installed a labyrinth, or they have a canvas labyrinth that they can roll out once a week, twice a week, once a month, on Easter, whatever it might be. That they're getting people who are looking beyond the um, religious rigidity that some churches have held on to, and they're picking up younger members because of the labyrinths that they put there.
yeah. Yeah, and I think that they needed to, especially the Protestant churches. It was, an awakening, like an awareness, like, oh, we've thrown the baby out with the bathwater in not including the contemplative aspect of worship. Your This is something that people are going to Buddhism, and they're going to other religions outside of Protestantism or Christianity to get this contemplative aspect back in their lives because they need this. And I think that's another reason that the churches were finally going, you know what, maybe we need to bring this back. This is a three pronged approach that, according to my understanding and my study, Jesus, this was a key element of Jesus' teachings, and it was, you know, suppressed and put aside in the 1500s, I think, whatever, 1600s, to bring this back, and people were needing it. And this was a way to bring this back in. So I think that also that argument was like, oh, people don't want to just sit in the pews and say a prayer for 2 minutes. They actually want a deep relationship to spirit in some way, and maybe we need to bring this back, and maybe that the labyrinths are the answers to that. Is the answer to that? So
Most definitely, yeah, that labyrinths embody the spiritual journey, the spiritual quest,
yeah,
that people, they want to have that closer relationship to their divine source.
yeah,
And so, yeah, I completely agree with you, Christiana.
yeah, yeah. So let's talk about, we could go on and on. But this probably could be easily a 2 hour recording, or not rather than just
I'm
a 1 hour.
available.
so, so let's talk about your moderator duties. You're going to be moderating this panel. It's a panel, Bountiful Harvest. It's about, and it's all the panel members are the original founding members, some of them, of the Labyrinth Society. So, talk a little bit about this. I know you weren't originally going to be the moderator, and then one of the panelists dropped out, and you very nicely stepped in. Um, Talk about what you think this panel, both the individuals and as a panel, will provide the attendees, and why do you think they'll enjoy this event?
Well, first of all, I'm very excited to moderate it. These are my colleagues, these are my buddies, my early experiences with the Society and Labyrinths in general. You've got a very talented group of panelists For example, you've got Marty Kane. I think of her as like the grand dame of labyrinth makers. And so, I mean, she created a labyrinth at Harvard University years ago. And, I was so impressed with that. And she brings this incredible knowledge of dowsing and art into her labyrinths. The idea of dowsing each individual stone or brick that goes into one of her labyrinths as to where it wants to be placed, so that it ultimately is in perfect harmony and balance with the surrounding bricks or stones and the environment itself, is just, it's mind-blowing to think of the kind of time and effort that goes into each of her labyrinths. You've got David Gallagher, who has been an incredible guiding force for the society and a labyrinth expert in his own right. Before he was executive director, he was kind of directing so many different things from behind the scenes in our early years as a society. You've got, let's see, who else is on there? I'm drawing a blank right now.
Helen Curry.
Oh, of course. Helen Curry, thank you. Our first president. What an incredible individual with her prison labyrinth program and the book that she wrote, and just a tireless worker to assist all the different projects that the early board of directors had come up with to try to bring to fruition. She had her hand in everything. And just what a wonderful, wonderful individual. And then there was one other person, I think.
Annette Reynolds.
Of course, Annette. How could I forget Annette? Bubbly, cheerful Annette, very, very talented nurse and artist. Just an incredible individual in the early years, and I'm sure has continued through those years to just make a huge difference down south with the labyrinths that she has either helped build, talk about, write about. It's an incredible panel, and I feel so blessed to be part of this group of people and to help bring out all of these wonderful talents that I've only begun to scratch the surface with and sharing with you, Christiana. And hopefully I'll do a good job in being able to really be able to bring out some fascinating things about their life and their history with labyrinths and with their lives in general. So I wouldn't want to miss it. I mean, if I wasn't moderating, I would definitely be there in the first row, totally attentive with my notebook open, ready to pick up some life wisdom.
Mm-hmm. All kinds of tidbits and information, for sure. Okay, great. Well, I'm looking forward to it too. Annette is going to be on my show in August, I think. And she's now caretaker of the Manitou Cave in Alabama. That is a labyrinthine cave, and she describes it as going into the womb of the mother every time you go down these paths and circle around and go down to the center space. And which she's really like taken the whole labyrinth experience that she's had for so many years and creating rituals. And Marty Kane, also incredible ritualist, creates amazing rituals and ceremonies, and so does Annette. And that aspect is, I think, people will really enjoy about the two of them, because both in building the labyrinths, and I know personally that I have had this experience too, and it produces it really just boosts the energy a hundredfold when you imbue each rock with sound and healing, and ask where it wants to go and ask how it wants to be placed, and then connect the rocks together so that they have a uninterrupted flow of energy passing between them. It is quite the bomb, I must say, quite the bomb. So, so to have these people on, it will be hard for you as a moderator to stop the event and keep it a timed event, because there's going to be so many people who want to ask so many questions. I think you're going to have that will be that will that will be interesting, because it has to fit into a certain time period, and it could probably go like for hours.
Yes, yes. So it's yes, and so hopefully I will bring my group therapy skills to the fore and keep people on track so that we can begin and end on time.
Yeah.
But yes, yes. Oh, wonderful, wonderful things you brought up. So
Yeah.
thank you for that, Christiana.
Yeah, you're welcome. So you are back actively involved with Labyrinth Society, volunteering in the membership area again, which is, I didn't realize forgot you're a membership chair. I didn't actually do my homework in that area. But you're in the membership area. And Janice Lewis, who's a membership chair, has been instrumental in revitalizing the regional reps program, and and now she's also focusing on involving more members and volunteering on the various TLS committees, and you are the volunteer coordinator for this. So talk a little bit about, agreeing to do this and coming back. I sort of put the bee in your bonnet years ago when, uh, and we did talk about this before Janice came on board. But talk a little bit about why you agreed uh, to come back in as a volunteer coordinator after already serving on the board.
Sure, sure. So my early years as membership chair, I think, put me in what I believed to be a perfect position to assist folks who were looking to become more active with the society, and kind of supporting them all along that journey. When I when I was membership chair, there really wasn't any sophisticated computer programs or way to keep the membership on computer, other than some fairly anachronous database programs. Everything was by letter. We sent out thank you notes. We sent out certificates. We sent out just everything was by mail. And so I needed to stay completely on top of each of the new members that came on board, as well as the existing membership. And so I felt that with that kind of experience, that I could really be supportive of folks as they came into the society and wanted to do something important to help with a particular project or whatever it might be, or as you suggested, the regional rep program, which has been wonderfully revitalized under Janice and under Carmen.
Mm-hmm.
So so it felt like a good fit. It felt like a good fit, and it felt like something that really, thanks to what you had put forth, Christiana, it really felt like it was an underserved situation when I came on board. And it continues to be a little bit demanding, other than around the gatherings, to bring new people into the volunteer realm. But with things like Facebook and other social media, with the email newsletters that go out to the membership, there's a greater opportunity for people to see what possible ways or what things might be interesting to volunteer for. And I think that's definitely something that is most highly needed at this particular time in the society, because there's so many wonderful visions that different members and board of directors have for where the society is going in the next 5 to 10 years. We need more and more people to step up and enjoy being volunteers to help bring those projects to fruition.
Yes. Here, absolutely. 100% accurate, Neal, for sure, for sure. Yeah, I don't think that people realize that we are a completely volunteer organization except for the executive director. And that, everybody, most of us have jobs outside and activities in our lives, and but we still are so deeply committed and passionate about the mission of the Labyrinth Society, and being there as a foundational organization for labyrinths worldwide, that we do what we can and when we can, and we so welcome new volunteers. It's the backbone of the organization. So thank you so much for stepping up and continuing your active involvement with the Labyrinth Society in this way. It's a pleasure working with you too, I have to tell you. And I love this board, and I've only been involved with one other, and there is no comparison. And because, as you said before, everybody's heart-centered, and I came on board in 2009, back into the fold in 2009, and on the board after that, and 2013, 14, yeah. And I'm just always bowled over by the agreeableness, the willingness to work together, the cooperation, because we've all been volunteers, we've all been neophytes, we've all started at not knowing and thinking we were the only ones in the world who, if you build it, they will come, have this urge to, like, what am I doing this? What? I don't know. It's just leading me. Okay, I'll just follow, kind of thing. And so we just love it when people volunteer and become a part of our workshop, our committees, and our events preparation and things like that. So thank you for spearheading that and being the liaison for them with the board. And so we get to point the people in the right way and get them on the right committees and take advantage of their desire and skill sets. So thank you so much.
Well, you're certainly very welcome, and thank you for that, Christiana. May I offer that statistically, people who volunteer in their organizations, they live longer and are happier people.
I like those statistics. Makes sense to me. Totally makes sense to me. So let's talk about the future. So 5 years from now, 10 years from now, what do you see as the future of the Labyrinth Society? What might be some of the big issues that you see in terms of continuing to support and foster the growth of labyrinths around the world, and educationally and in all areas? We have that DVD and we've put it on YouTube, and we have the videos that we've broken it down into all different sections. So what do you see? What, in your opinion, what do you see for TLS?
Okay, well, that's
a big question.
I'm going to do a little bit of punting on that question.
Yeah.
And I'm going to redirect it to the fact that back in 2016, Janice Lewis, who is the membership chair, brought together a committee that would allow us to utilize a feedback mechanism with our membership called the World Cafe. And I was privileged to be part of that committee and was able to see it from start to finish. At the gathering in 2016 in Houston, a number of the attendees sat at tables and colored and did all sorts of different things, but the main focus was for them to answer with their own creativity and vision 3 different questions. One was about membership, one was about fundraising, and one was about products that possibly the society could create that would foster a greater global platform for the society. And so the World Cafe experience brought out some incredible creativity and answers from our membership. And not only did that happen at the gathering in 2016, but it was followed up on Facebook and with the email newsletter, where members who maybe couldn't attend the gathering or didn't attend the World Cafe at the gathering could voice their creative vision about these different questions. And so the board of directors received a ton of wonderful suggestions for the future in those 3 different areas. And so I am very optimistic that what is going to happen as a result, once all of those different answers have been kind of correlated and put in the hopper and mixed around a little bit to see what makes sense and what doesn't make sense as a vision for TLS, that we're going to move forward in such a big way that people are going to be clamoring from all over the world to want to be part of our society. Now, that was that answer. I have one thing to kind of answer your question.
Okay.
In my opinion, it would be great if the yearly gatherings were a little less expensive. Now, I have talked to a number of people about this, and there are all sorts of concerns that make creating our gatherings less expensive. And so I realize this is a pipe dream, but the one thing that I do understand about the society is that oftentimes things that start off as pipe dreams come to reality.
Yeah.
Given enough time, given enough vision, given enough elbow grease, given enough flexibility. So I think that this is possible to be able to attract more folks to our gatherings if the price of the gatherings was diminished. I know other groups have done it. The question is, this is something for the board of directors, and I'm sure it's hashed around from time to time when people make that, well, gee, I wish it was cheaper. But the bottom line is these are incredible events, and I really hope that those of you who will be listening to this podcast at some point, hopefully before October, will want to come to Chicago for the 20th anniversary of the Labyrinth Society and their gatherings. Yeah. So that's really all I have to say about that.
Yeah, thank you, Neal. Thank you for pointing out that. And we have talked about it for the whole long. I think it comes up every year. For every year that I've been on the board, it's come up. And it's interesting because one of the things that is intrinsic to the style of this event that TLS created is that it's never in the same place. It's always in different parts of the country, sometimes in Canada, hasn't been in Mexico yet, but sometimes in Canada. Um, um, and um, and so one of the ways that I know that other organizations keep their costs down is by having their annual organizational meeting at the same place every year, and they get a discount that way. And that's a big thing. That's a big difference between many, like the Healing Touch organization or Therapeutic Touch organization and some of these other associations that they will have their meetings at the same place. They get discounted rates. They get, because they, if they keep coming back, the place where they're, that the place where they hold it will give them better deals. And so when you move around, because that's the nature of how this event is created, that's an issue. And that's probably a big issue. And we've talked about having it in the same place every year. That's another thing that's come up, so that we can take advantage of reduced rates, reduce cost, reduce expenses. So that's just one of the many areas that we are looking at all the time. And yes, to me, it's the whole thing with, if a labyrinth wants to be built, just get out of the way and just go with the flow. And I think that there is that to be said about this, that if this truly is something that wants to happen over the next 5 years, get out of the way and it's going to happen, because there's not a single person on the board that doesn't support that, as long as it's feasible and cost effective for the Labyrinth Society. And, so this is, it's an interesting, it's interesting to us because we don't have, like, Veritas has a center. It wasn't Ions, and now they've moved. And they hold their meetings there, and they have trainings there. They all also go out to other places, and the gathering is not like that. It's a very different animal. So it will be interesting to see what transpires over the next 5 to 10 years in that area, and I think the regional reps is one area, that is one way that there can be different approaches to gatherings and regional events, et cetera, and that could go then further into outside of the United States and over into Europe and because Australia is already doing it. Australia has a strong force down there. They've already taken it on, and they have their own gathering down there, yearly gathering now. So it is, and which TLS totally supports, wholeheartedly supports. So I think that you'll see more of that also, where you'll have whole regions deciding, let's put something on here, and where TLS will support it, because again, we don't have a Labyrinth Society headquarters anywhere. We're all over the place, all over the United States. So it's interesting that this is how it's evolved, and it will be interesting to see what happens over the next 5 to 10 years in this area. It will be interesting to see. So and I'm so very excited, and I know that social media and technology will have a huge impact and in this, and in how we get the message out, and the information that we have, that TLS has, out to more people, and more effectively. So it's very exciting. I think it's a very exciting time.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Neal, we've gone a little bit over, but this has been wonderful. I had one other question. What was it? I'm going to go back, and this is off the cuff, but we talked about mileposts. How about when the pod structure was created? I didn't touch on that. Were you a part of the board when the pod structure, that was the structure of how the board of directors was how it is used or how it functions? Was that were you there when that was created? Did you
No,
no, oh, okay. No, okay. I wasn't sure about that. I'd forgotten the timeline there with the pod structure, because I
I,
think
I'm guessing that that was something that our current president, Kay Whipple,
uh
brought to the table, but I'm not sure.
years ago when she was first on the board. Yeah, I wasn't sure about the dates. I should have looked that up, but I didn't, because that was a key area in the, not only with the bylaws that were created with Labyrinth Society right in the beginning you had to do, but the whole financial aspect, and then how to mirror the labyrinth in the way the board of directors is governed. And so they came up with this pod structure, which is a wheel within a wheel within a wheel, a circle within a circle within a circle, with the different chair directors on the different areas, and the committees on the outer circle. And so everybody is integrated, everybody works together, and no one person is running the show. It's not a top down organization. It mirrors the labyrinth and the mission of the TLS. So to me, that's another key um, milepost to me, because it was very effective. It's been very effective in allowing for lots of different opinions on the board, keeping this idea of going forward and flourishing. And you need to be able to have your opinions and speak up and share and share your ideas. So I think that was another area and I just was wondering if you had anything to do with that, and I'd forgotten. So went over.
No, no, but I'll just say that the original board that I sat on, no one was bashful as far as sharing their ideas. So
Not in that group. I think everybody will realize that when they listen to when they're there in front of the harvest panel, the yeah, Bountiful harvest panel, they'll see that. So yeah, they're pretty strong bunch of individuals there. So it'll be fun to be participate in that and be a part of that. So I am going to end this program. We're out of time. We're a little over, and it's been such a pleasure sharing this hour and 20 minutes with you, Neal. Thank you so much for joining me today,
well, thank you so much, Christiana, for inviting me. It's certainly been a pleasure for me as well.
and many continued blessings on your path. And looking forward to seeing you in the fall.
Excellent. See you at the gathering.
Okay, great. Bye bye, and have a great rest of your week and a great weekend,
Thanks, you too.
and a great summer.
Oh, thanks. You too.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Labyrinth Society's Many Paths, Many Visions on GoToMeeting and broadcast by Spreaker with your host, Christiana Britton. Be sure to check the Labyrinth Society website, the TLS Facebook page, and the TLS Global Group on social media on Facebook, YouTube, and Google Plus for a list of upcoming dates and guests. I will promise to get that out as soon as I have the other slots filled. It will be hopefully finished by this end of this week. And also, if this podcast has piqued your interest in the Labyrinth Society and you'd like more information about membership, please go to www.labyrinthsociety.org/membership. Ciao, namaste, and may you find what you need on your path through life.